We believe what starts here at LSU changes the world and builds the future, and we invite you to listen in on this stage of its construction. Join us on Campus Connections with Colin Raby as we find and learn from student leaders, builders, thinkers, and change makers on 91.1 KLSU Baton Rouge.
All right, and we are back. Sorry, a little bit of technical difficulties this morning. We are here in the KLSU studio with Colin Raby and Sebastian Canales.
Hello, hello. Welcome everyone tuning in to listen live to this episode of Campus Connections with me, your host, Colin Raby. Joining me is our production manager and co-host, Julius Pilata. And joining us today is a member of the LSU Bateman team. The Bateman team is running a campaign with the News Literacy Project aimed at equipping people with the tools to distinguish between truth and deception in the current media environment. So joining us is Sebastian Canales.
Yeah, hey y'all. Thank you again, Colin, for having me today. I'm super excited to talk about our campaign as well as talk about the News Literacy Project a little more. Awesome. Do you want to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Yeah, so my name is Sebastian Canales. I am a senior here at LSU, majoring in mass communication with a concentration in public relations and a minor in sociology. And I'm currently on the LSU Bateman team, which is comprises of me and 5 other students in the Manship School, and we pretty much are in a case study competition with 75 other universities around the country, and our client this year is the News Literacy Project.
What do you mean by your client?
Yeah, so part of our senior capstone is to work with an actual client, so some kind of nonprofit that wants students to use our PR skills and help their organization. So this year with the LSU Bateman team, the Bateman team is part of the organization PRSSA, which stands for Public Relations Student Society of America, and so they partnered with PRSSA, the News Literacy Project, and we're working with them along with 75 other universities in a competition. So we've been hosting a lot of events. Other universities are hosting a lot of events too. And it's kind of like this big month-long competition from February 6th until March 6th. So we've been all over social media, all over campus, promoting our client, the News Literacy Project, as well as trying to inform LSU students and the public about the threats of fake news, misinformation, and trying to also teach them the tools and the necessarily skills to decipher fake news and how to identify it.
Gotcha. So I do have a question about fake news. What do you define that to be?
Yeah, so fake news is pretty much anything that is taken out of context, like in the sense that not telling the full truth of a certain topic. For example, I can honestly bring up a recent altered photo that just surfaced recently. So President Biden visited Ukraine with President Zelensky, and there was a big viral photo, a few photos that got leaked of President Biden that were altered, showing President Biden eating ice cream in Ukraine at an ice cream shop, and actually showing him holding hands with President Zelensky on his trip, but those were altered photos. And the News Literacy Project pretty much helps to show people viral photos and actually show them that, okay, this was false. They use this program called Rumor Guard, and so Rumor Guard takes any kind of viral news topic, any kind of viral photo or video that's kind of gone on Twitter or social media and has been misinterpreted, and they pretty much help decipher that, show the actual facts, things like that. So, misinformation and fake news can pretty much be anything that isn't telling the full truth, altering certain information, changing, certain wording or things like that to make a certain person or a certain topic look bad.
And that would include leaving out information as well, and
Absolutely.
Pointing the story in a specific bias.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You mentioned Rumor Guard. Is this an app or a website?
Yeah, so the News Literacy Project has this website called Rumor Guard, which pretty much, again, it's just a website that takes any kind of recent viral topic, whether that's something on social media, a news story, a picture that has been kind of altered, and they pretty much help kind of decipher, okay, this was what the fake kind of picture was, and then this is kind of why it was fake, and here's like reasons that you can tell that it was fake and altered, and here's the actual photo. So again, recently with the President Biden, they showed the fake picture, and then they showed the actual picture that was taken in Ukraine to kind of show that, you know, this was the fake picture that a lot of propaganda groups were using to kind of show, you know, President Biden in a bad light, and then this is kind of the actual photo that they found that was the actual photo taken.
So that brings up an interesting topic, which is in an era of increasingly good deep fakes and artificial intelligence simulations, how do you think, obviously, so in this situation, there was a group of journalists that was there taking pictures, so they were able to validate which were the real pictures against the fake pictures because there was only a small group there taking pictures. In general events where maybe there isn't a small select group taking that, how do you think as a society we are going to handle deep fakes and fake pictures when it's a lot harder to distinguish between what's real and it's a lot harder to prove that one is real and one isn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely agree with you. I think a big threat to our democracy is, you know, the increase of AI and deep fakes really altering, you know, certain stories, altering images and things like that. And so part of the News Literacy Project is to really teach the public the tools and the necessary skills to identify, you know, what's fake and what's not. So really just, you know, if you ever come across, you know, a news article, especially in this generation, Generation Z is so prone to finding news on Twitter and social media, a lot of times that can leave room for fake news to just easily be published. And so really taking the necessary skills, so actually double checking, you know, the news that you're reviewing. So if you find something on Twitter and you find it really interesting, fact check it, double check it, go and look up the author of the article. You know, does this author have past credibility of publishing other articles that are truthful, or have they also been publishing a lot of other fake news that has also been debunked? Also taking the initiative to look at the website that it's on. Does the website have a lot of ads that are inappropriate, or ads that, you know, don't necessarily look legit, or if the website looks a little funky, things like that. So taking those skills can actually help individuals understand if something is real or not. Just really taking the initiative to ask those questions and double check. Don't just always believe everything you see online, especially with like AI and things like that can 100% be a threat. But being able to decipher it and double checking and asking those questions, and you know, with Google you can literally do an image search. So if you see, you know, an image online, you can simply, you know, copy and paste it on Google and see if there's other news articles and news organizations using that picture, or if, you know, another news article was like, hey, this picture that has been going around social media is actually fake, and here's why. So definitely taking those steps, those extra steps to kind of see, you know, what's real and what's fake can definitely help a lot.
That's interesting. You talked about copying, pasting a picture into Google.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, you can do that through TinEye is the name of the image search thing that I typically use. There's a couple.
Yeah, and then Google also has on Google Images, you can just directly take the picture and post it on the search, and it'll search similar images or the exact image or images that are...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that part of what you all are doing is educating the public on tools important to news literacy. What are some of the most important tools that you think people should know about?
Yeah, so with the News Literacy Project, they have a few programs. They have 3 programs that they actually have launched. So starting with Rumor Guard. Rumor Guard is pretty much a website by the News Literacy Project to help recognize misinformation and stop it in its tracks. So there's a lot of fact-checked viral images and rumors that have gone around on social media. And so the point of the website is to pretty much build people's news literacy and really evaluate those claims and debunk them online. And then there's also Checkology. So Checkology is just like a free e-learning platform with engaging authoritative lessons on subjects like news media biases, misinformation, conspiracy thinking, and more. So it's a free e-learning platform that you can sign up for, and it gives you a lot of lessons to kind of gain those tools to decipher misinformation. And the people that are actually teaching these lessons are like notable news reporters and educators teaching these lessons. And then Informable, which is an application, a mobile app that you can download now, and pretty much it's a news literacy project designed to help players develop the skills to become news literate in like a fun way. So it's just like a game format. There's different levels, there's different kind of concentrations to kind of identify like fake news, evidence or not, ad or not, is this bias or not, or is this like actual news, or is this opinion? And it's a fun game that you can play on your phone, and it's available on the App Store and the Android App Store as well.
Cool. So these are essentially tools that can help both in individuals checking the news that they're consuming, but also tuning their skills at identifying false information?
Absolutely, yeah. And the News Literacy Project on their website, it's just newslit.org. They have a lot of great information as well, a lot of great articles, a lot of great graphics and infographics to use to help you gain those skills to be more news literate.
Definitely. I actually went on the Newslit website before this conversation, and they have a little like news literacy test that you can take. And the very first question it asked you, I actually wanted to kind of run by you because I had a little bit of a question about it. So the very first, if you go on the Newslit website and you take it, their first question is, which statement best describes the difference between a reporter and a columnist, right? And it said that the correct answer is a role of a reporter is to inform the public about newsworthy events or topics by gathering and verifying information, then presenting it in as objective a manner as possible, whereas columnists offer their opinions and provide evidence to back up their positions. So do you agree that that's a good differentiation between reporter and columnist? And if so, do we have any reporters that are really informing the public in an objective a manner as possible, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I definitely agree about the definitions. They're definitely two different people. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that, like, a big issue that we're kind of facing in today's world is that a lot of news reporters now are becoming a little bit more polarized. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily no longer reporting on the facts, and that's really what the difference between a reporter is. The reporter reports on the facts, whereas a columnist is more giving their opinion, their input on things. Whereas, you know, in this world, a lot of reporters now are becoming a little polarized and not necessarily reporting the facts, but also giving a little bit of their bias into the things. And then that's kind of what the News Literacy Project's all about, is really giving people and teaching people the skill set to be able to decipher that. Being able to read an article and be like, okay, this was 100% news, and taking the initiative to do further research. Be like, okay, I really love this article. Let me do some more research and see if, you know, what this reporter was saying was 100% true, or if there were some biases in it. So that's exactly kind of what the News Literacy Project does. Yeah. Right.
So part of the project isn't necessarily saying how to identify the non-biased reporters, but rather saying, okay, everyone's biased. Here's how you can at least recognize the bias.
Yes, like in a sense, yes. But it's mostly just teaching people the skills to, like, definitely not necessarily believe everything that you see is true. But again, just taking those extra steps to make sure that, you know, what you're reading and what you're sharing online is 100% factual and that you're not contributing to that misinformation.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, I know when I saw that, my first thought was, well, if a reporter is someone that gathers and verifies information in an objective manner as possible. I'd almost be worried we don't have any reporters in the current media landscape, because you look at the reporting of facts. You can report facts, but select which facts you use, which is a huge problem. Everything you say can be 100% factual, but if there's something that instantly refutes it, I don't know why this is the very first example. It's probably not the most, the best example, but like the first example I thought of was the difference between Newtonian and Einsteinian physics, right? So if you just look in the world around you, you could be like, yeah, Newton was right. Like, that's the best version of reality of like how we interact with the world, and like you would be correct. However, it's not the full story, and it's not the most correct. And once you look in a different application, it's completely wrong. Or like if you, let's take the story recently of Joe Biden going to Ukraine. Depending on which facts you purport about those, if you run a story that says Joe Biden not in Ohio for the crash, that's a fact. Or if you run a story that says Joe Biden supporting Ukraine, those are both, or in Ukraine, those are both factual, but the presentation of those facts completely changes the takeaway.
Yeah, so what I also want to say too is, so we had an event a couple weeks ago. We partnered with the LSU Cold Case Project, and we brought in 2 reporters that covered the Trump presidency, and so they kind of gave us their input of how it was covering, Donald Trump when he was president, and kind of talking a little bit about misinformation and fake news and things like that. And so the thing with whenever you read a news article, every news reporter, is going to be covering the article in many different perspectives. So don't just think that, okay, if you're interested in a topic, for example, with the Joe Biden and the Ohio incident, if you're going to read an article about the derailment in Ohio, don't just read one article. Try and read other articles by other reporters from other different organizations, because every reporter, like you said, one reporter is going to report one fact and the other one's going to report a different fact, but they're both factual. So if you're reading different news reporters' facts and just kind of reading one thing, he's going to report one perspective, and then another reporter is going to report a different perspective, you're kind of going to add on to that factual information. So although both articles are true, you gain more perspective on the incident. So this one has a different perspective, and then you're reading another article that has a different perspective, and that's going to constantly add on to your knowledge of the incident. And so you're gaining more knowledge on what happened, how did it happen, things like that. And so you're not just sticking to just one article, you're constantly reading other articles, but it's all in the same topic, but you're gaining more facts along the way. So yeah,
sounds like a lot of work.
I mean, it does sound like a lot of work, but definitely, if you're that kind of person that wants to, stick to the facts, definitely keeping, reading different articles from different journalists is going to help you keep yourself in check and factual.
So I do have a question, kind of a little bit of a sidestep from that. We were talking earlier about altered images and videos and audio. Like, I heard one audio of President Biden supposedly talking about extraterrestrial visitors and stuff like that and aliens. And I've seen a lot of these videos of the presidents playing Minecraft together, and they're all AI generated voices. I think that's very funny, but is there something inherently ethically wrong about the falsification of voice or video and stuff? Is there a place for it, or is it just all bad?
So I definitely do believe, with AI, with our technology advancing so rapidly, AI can definitely be a big threat. As far as ethics, I do believe that when it comes to news reporting and presenting the facts, if you're using those kinds of deep fakes to kind of prove your point, that's 100% unethical. Whereas there's a kind of firm line between a parody and using deep fakes for that. I know there's a Netflix series that kind of uses AI to put like celebrities, like what if they were just your average people, and so that's, you know, a parody, and, you know, it's supposed to be for humor and things like that. But whenever it comes for like news reporting and, you know, presenting the facts and things like that, then that becomes a big issue for us. So definitely, you know, deepfakes is definitely a huge issue, but with AI and things like that, if it's used for like parody's sake, of course, like that's totally fine. That's perfectly legal. Whereas, you know, if you're using that to present, you know, facts and things like that, then 100% unethical.
Yeah, and do you think there's any room for AI to be used in helping fight against and detect fake news? Do you think that there's a possibility for that?
Well, I mean, that kind of just comes down to the arms race, you know, idea. Whereas, yeah, as it progresses, you'll get the detection softwares that are better, but then it'll progress and the detection. It's kind of like antivirus softwares right now, where those that seek to do harm will always be one step ahead, but there will definitely be a way to counter it. But I think one of the things you really bring up is the distinction between misinformation and disinformation, right? There's all sorts of things that are misinformation that aren't necessarily intrinsically bad. The difference between the two, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the largest differences between the two is kind of the intent, right? With disinformation, you are putting information out there with the intention to deceive, with the intention to lead people down the wrong way for some sort of end, whereas misinformation, it could just be mistakes, or it could be a parody account, right? You could call the Babylon Bee misinformation, but everyone knows it, and it's kind of funny. What?
I'm sorry. No, you're good.
No, just make sure you're talking into the mic. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that's one of the big things you brought up with the efficacy of using these voice softwares and AI and things, where if you are using them to produce disinformation, that's probably not particularly moral. But if you're using them to produce misinformation in a reasonable format that is parody or something to that, and it's very obviously so, like you brought up all the presidents playing, what was it?
Minecraft and just different games in general.
Yeah. Like, okay, that's not going to harm anyone, you know? So that's big. And, you know, you were talking about earlier consuming multiple different forms of information. And I know sometimes people think that's hard, and that's what normally social media gets a really bad rap when it comes to disinformation. But one of the things I actually find social media really helpful for is I'm able to follow sources that report things very differently and see both of them on a consistent basis. And I'm often surprised by kind of seeing something there and then seeing something there and kind of seeing what, at least on like a political landscape, kind of what both sides are coming at it with. But it does bring up the interesting question of the role that social media plays, and also the role that social media, I know it's been big recently with Twitter, but also Instagram, Facebook. You know, what role do you think social media should play in regulating or filtering fake news or disinformation from what people see? And who do you think should be deciding that?
Yeah, so I honestly, you know, think that social media is a great tool to consume news, but you know, you really have to be very skeptical whenever you are on social media and you see, you know, news pop up. I do believe that new social media platforms and CEOs and these organizations need to take the initiative to kind of prevent misinformation and fake news from taking over their platforms. I know Twitter, they've definitely, you know, misinformation has been on there for a very long time, but they are taking the steps to kind of debunk that. I know with like some updates, Twitter, they'll have like little synopsis on the bottom, be like, this is actually fake news, and here's like the little the context of what actually happened. And you know, this, like, I think that's what organizations need to do. I know Facebook is trying to do that as well, and other organizations, because social media is, you know, in this day and age, kind of where a lot of this younger generation is getting their news. But again, like I said, you really need to take it, like, go on that social media platform and be very skeptical about it and don't believe everything you see, and just take the steps to kind of fact check it and debunk it. But again, like, social media is so convenient for us, and getting the news that way is 100%, you know, nobody really, like, not a lot of our younger generation likes to read, or like, you know, go on like the New York Times and read a whole article about something. It's easier and more consolidated on social media, just kind of saying the facts. But definitely CEOs and organizations of these social media platforms need to really take the steps to prevent misinformation from taking over their social media, because social media can definitely be a really great thing. It really helps spread something at a faster rate and a convenient, super convenient. But if you're, spreading misinformation and if it spreads super fast, then that's an issue. But if organizations are, debunking it and putting that context like Twitter is, then that helps reduce the level of people actually, thinking that this misinformation is true. So yeah, I feel like these social media platforms definitely need to take extra steps and extra precautions to kind of have a team to analyze what's being posted at all hours and making sure that what's being posted is true, and what's not what's being posted that isn't true is taken down or place like some kind of label on it that's telling the public, hey, this isn't true at all, and be cautious about it.
And so if there's something that's kind of in between, right? So let's just say there's a team like that, and there's a news story that's going around, but it's hard to find information on it. So it's kind of in that valley between it might be true, it might not be true. Maybe there's more research that needs to be done. Maybe it's all kind of allegations. Generally, do you think you would err more on the side of letting it be there, or more on the side of down regulating how many views it gets, or putting something saying, this might not be true, until it's solidified in the public information, I guess?
So I would definitely say that what the social media platform should do is definitely label it as, okay, like some of this might be true, but some of it might not be, and here are some resources about that topic that you can search up yourself and just kind of double check it and see what exactly is true and what's exactly false. Because I know on Twitter, like sometimes certain things might be true, and then there might be a little couple sentences in there that were 100% false. But I feel like adding resources on that topic under that tweet could definitely help keep the person who's reading it educated on it, and they'll be like, okay, like this might be true, let me search, let me click these links and read more about it, just so I can make up my own mind on it and see if it was true and have my own opinion on it.
So more of combating false information by providing better information. Absolutely, rather than necessarily removing the false information.
Yes.
Gotcha. And that's one thing that you mentioned that I think is particularly important, is you mentioned how it can be difficult and how there has to be an intentionality with how you're using social media if you want to make sure that you're not being deceived or subject to disinformation. And I think that intentionality isn't thought about enough, because left to, if there's no intention with what you're doing, there are certain cognitive biases that will lead you down rabbit holes of disinformation, whether it is the fact that you're more drawn to things that scare you, or whether you're more drawn to things of group biases and things. I know one of the things that Plug-in LSU has reported on a bit are different cognitive biases that play into the consumption of news. Can you go over some of the most important, most interesting cognitive biases that you don't think as many people are aware of as would be, that you wish more people were aware of?
So what I really want to discuss is definitely the idea of like sock puppets.
Okay.
If no one knows what a sock puppet is, it's pretty much like a fictitious online persona that someone has created to pretty much make their false ideas and make people fall for it. So for example, someone might create this alter ego, this fake name, and have a news article about how ice cream might cause you to die in like 20 years, and they created this fake persona about it and have like all these articles about it, and have created this false identity and have spread that, and that's what a sock puppet is. It's someone that's trying to make people believe something, and so that can often be an issue. And so sock puppets, that's everywhere. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really common these days, like the Liver King and stuff like that. Yeah.
Liver King and things like that.
So
but
by Liver King, I guess, do you mean that it's a sock puppet in the sense of he was saying he was natural and he never was, so he was pretending to be something that he wasn't online?
Yes, and he was trying to present this kind of health lifestyle almost in the way that I don't know, it's not very journalistic, I guess, what he was doing, but it was still kind of a sock puppet act. And we see so many of these on social media, these influencers. And
those who may not know, Liver King is someone that's a very fit person, purports that he eats like raw liver and raw beef and things, and he was saying that he lived this all-natural lifestyle, and he gained quite a following, and I think he might have even sold some, I don't know, probably not supplements, but he sold something. He was making money off of this lifestyle somehow, and then it came out that he was using steroids and things like that, which was just a pure deception.
$10,000 worth of steroids a month, just like
Allegedly. Yeah.
I think he admitted to that in the video.
He probably admitted to it.
Yeah, he had his apology video.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so sock puppets, they're everywhere, especially in like social media. It's so easy to create, a fake account and spread misinformation, but really taking those steps to, consider the source, reading just beyond like what you're reading, and taking the initiative to, double check it, look up, other articles and other information on that topic and things like that can definitely help you understand, if this was misinformation, if this is fake news, things like that.
Are there any prominent sock puppets that would serve as like a good example, other than maybe like Liver King, and more in like the journalism media sphere that you can think of off the top of your head?
That I can think of at the moment.
Oh, good. But essentially, so let's just say you see a tweet from someone that their bio says they're a journalist, and it's talking about how the 3 objects that were shot down, the 3 UAPs that were shot down recently, are confirmed to be alien life, and there's a whole story about that. How would one know that that's a completely fictitious account on Twitter?
So the best thing to do, again, there's like a few steps to take whenever you're trying to identify fake news. One of the biggest thing is like consider your source. Okay, this is Twitter. I gotta be skeptical about it because it is a social media platform. So let me do a simple Google search on what this person tweeted, and see if there's other articles that have been published by other organizations and things like that. If nothing pops up, then okay, like maybe something's up. And then checking the author, like who wrote it. Okay, if this person says they're a news reporter, let me just do a simple search of their name, see if they've ever published other articles, or what organization are they reporting for, things like that. And then like supporting their sources. Are they just tweeting this, or are they actually providing other sources to back their claims up? That's definitely something that you can look at to make sure if something is true or not. Also, checking your own biases. Is what this person reporting? Do I believe it? Is this something that I have a belief in, or is this affecting my judgment, things like that?
So were you talking about the like kind of confirmation bias thing there? Or I guess, can you get into some of those cognitive biases? Like you were talking about, is this something I already believe, right? That would be more of a confirmation bias, where you're more likely to believe things than what you already believe, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, one more time. Say that one more time.
Yeah, no, just one of the things that y'all are talking about are the different conceptual mental biases that we bring to the table when we're reading these news stories and such. And one of the things you just mentioned is, you have to check your biases when you're reading a story. And one of the things you mentioned was, do I do I believe this? Is this in line with my current beliefs? And so I was just saying that kind of is an example of the confirmation bias, where you're more likely to believe things that are already in line with your current beliefs, so it doesn't create cognitive dissonance, right? So like when you see something, like for example, if I was reading a story and it said, the sky is purple, right? That would create some cognitive dissonance, because like my perception of reality is that on most days the sky is kind of blue or shades of green, like generally that. Like purple sky seems kind of out there. Now there might have been like an event where a whole bunch of purple stuff was released into the sky and cool, there's purple sky. But anything that goes against your current beliefs and your current knowledge set and creates that cognitive dissonance will be less effective at convincing you just immediately. Obviously there's data and everything like that, but just kind of intuitively is less effective at convincing you than something that is more similar to what you already believe, which is kind of an example of the kind of confirmation bias. And so are there any other main mental biases that y'all are working with and talking about? Or
So what our campaign is really around, we don't necessarily focus a lot on biases, but yeah, of course, like no one likes to be wrong, especially whenever when you're so passionate about something and you're telling people about it, but then it turns out that what you were saying is 100% not factual. As humans, we don't necessarily want to hold ourselves accountable for that kind of stuff, but that's definitely something that we need to do. Misinformation and spreading that, if you're so passionate about it, then you really shouldn't, you gotta always make sure that what you're telling people is 100% factual, and really taking the steps to make sure that what you're saying and holding yourself accountable is key to like what you're, I don't know, like I guess what I mean by like, you just always want to make sure like whatever you're spreading is truthful, and that you're providing the contents for other people to take the steps to make sure what you're saying is true. So like I said earlier, like if you're tweeting something or if you're spreading something that you're passionate about, make sure that you're providing resources and links for other people to do research on their own time, and make sure that what you're saying is true, and you have the backing to support your claims and things like that.
Well, that's interesting, because what you just described on the consumer front actually also sounds a lot like what writers and things should do when they're crafting an article, right? Not just a whole bunch of kind of abstract platitudes about something, but here is the data, or here is this set of facts, or here is a link to this thing that we're talking about. That one of the indications of credibility is links to other credible sources and other credible means of information, whereas sometimes you come across these articles that they're just saying things with nothing to really back it up, no links. Maybe they're using a study that has 500 people, which is like not close to statistically significant, and things like that. So it is really interesting that those same things apply on the consumer side, where not only are those good practices for writing something, but it's also things that you can look for in an article that if it doesn't have that, at least your kind of alarms can go off and say, ooh, maybe I shouldn't trust this a little more. And it also brings up, you mentioned obviously no one likes to be wrong and things like that. Well, the inevitable conclusion of that train of thought is that you also have to be willing to admit when you don't know. One of the hardest things is someone asks a question and just saying, don't know. Like that's hard. A lot of people will try to search for an answer or something like that, rather than really admitting the kind of line between their knowledge and their ignorance.
And what I want to say about, when it comes to like news reporting, and really making sure, as an individual, if something is legit or not, there's like a few steps that you can take to kind of assess the news source and make sure that what you're reading is accurate, and that's just simply like the first step is after reading an article that you're really interested about, is just doing a quick search. Are there, again, like mentioned earlier, are other people reporting about it, things like that, and also looking for standards. Every news organization has some kind, like every actual like legit reputable news organization has some kind of standards when it comes to reporting. So most of the time those are presented on their website, presented somewhere that can be easily accessible. So if a reputable news organization has these standards of like ethics and things like that, then that's one thing to like look at whenever you're reading an article and be like, okay, this might be true if they kind of had they hold their reporters accountable, things like that. You also want to check for transparency. Quality news organizations often have are transparent. They present the facts. They're not trying to hide certain things, or as you mentioned earlier, like they're not putting their own like biases into their reporting, things like that.
Do you mind if I just ask a quick question about that one?
Yeah.
So you said checking that source and making sure they're presenting that information in that manner. What would be some practical examples? Because all of the prominent, what I would call institutional news examples, there's a clear bias you can point to for a large number of the stories. I mean, I guess but what are some of the main examples you could bring up that you see as news organizations that not only have this ethics code, but actually kind of repeatedly follow it and do have that ethos of not only reporting the end takeaway, but all of the facts and steps needed to get to that end takeaway?
Yeah, so
are there any like prominent examples?
I would definitely say like the New York Times. We had an event, as mentioned earlier. One of the journalists that talked to us was from the New York Times, and she mentioned how whenever you get hired on them, you're given this big book of like standards of the New York Times, and like kind of like you're also held accountable for your work that you produce. So whatever you are publishing, if it's not truthful, then of course there's going to be consequences. The editors are constantly going to make sure that what you're reporting is going to be 100% accurate and there's not those biases that you mentioned. And if there are, then of course like there's going to be consequences. They might get in trouble, might be put on like leave or something like that. But definitely just standards with it comes to like a code of standards is something that I feel like all news organizations need to have, because it really does hold their reporters accountable. And I understand that certain news organizations might not have that, and so that often might cause those biases to be present in their reporting. But I do believe that more news organizations need to create standards for their reporters so that misinformation or biases aren't gonna be an issue whenever they're publishing these articles.
And before we get back to the list of steps people can take, you mentioned that you had that reporter from the New York Times. Were you all able to ask them how they balance following journalistic integrity with the first word that comes to mind is like clickbait, right? With the profit motive of the company to get things that are going to go viral, that people are going to look at, that bring people to their site. Because often those two things conflict, right? Telling the most truthful story packed with facts and data is normally not the most compelling narrative, but telling a narrative implies that you're not just being factual, that you are inserting kind of a narrative arc that goes outside of the purely factual. So were you all able to ask them how they balance that journalistic integrity with the kind of profit motive of the company that would motivate them to produce more kind of clickbaity or biased news?
So the two reporters that we talked to, one was from the New York Times and the other one was from the Washington Post, which are two reputable news organizations. But as far as like this whole idea of like clickbait and things like that, those are like two things that those two news organizations kind of push away from. They're not trying to deceive their viewers or their subscribers in any way, shape, or form. Their whole purpose is just to present the facts and the facts only, and kind of publish that and allow the reader to form their own opinions on certain topics and things like that. So as far as like clickbait and things like that, that's definitely not what those organizations are all about. And they didn't really touch a lot on it. They just kind of mostly discuss like how, as journalists, they pursued the facts amid like all the fake news at the time, or in like today's world with like fake news claims, things like that, and how they kind of pushed away from that and just pursued the facts only during their time as news reporters.
Gotcha. Was there more on the, so after you have kind of identified the source and as a reputable source, were there any other steps there?
Yeah, so as mentioned, check for transparency. Quality news organizations should be transparent in their reporting, not only about their reporting practices, but also about their ownership and the funding. You know, is this news organization funded by the GOP or, you know, the Democratic Party, things like that, that might affect how they report on certain politicians, things like that. And then examine how errors are handled. At times, you know, as humans, we make errors, especially, you know, at times maybe a news organization might, you know, publish something that wasn't entirely true. Credible news sources are accountable for their mistakes, and they correct them. So if a news organization isn't accountable for their errors, you know, that could be iffy whenever you're reading an article by them, if they're not taking accountability for the error that they made and trying to correct it.
So you would say a measure of trustworthiness is putting up in some easy to find place the mistakes that have been made.
Yes. So like,
Gotcha.
Is there evidence that, you know, this news organization corrects or clarifies the claims or their errors that they made? And then access news coverage. So an important step in venting like sources is just taking the time to read and assess several news organizations and news articles about that topic. So do you see like the original report, or do they provide like straight news reports, or is it just commentary, or are they just putting in their own opinion whenever they're reporting on the news? So really just taking like these 5 steps can definitely help an individual make sure that what they're reading is legit, is 100% true, or you know, can help them identify fake news and things like that.
And you know, I would also say probably it's also a good indication, not just from news sources, but also from leaders, from politicians, from anyone that is willing to admit that they've made a mistake, is probably at least slightly more trustworthy than someone that believes they're infallible.
Exactly, and that's true like on a PR standpoint. You know, with crisis communications, that's something that we learn in the Manship School. You know, you always gotta take accountability for what you're reporting and what if you're holding, you know, if your company that you're working for, you know, has a big crisis that they're seeing in like a bad light in the news, taking accountability for that, addressing who was affected by the situation, can definitely help your organization kind of heal from it. You know, taking accountability, empathizing with the individuals that could have been affected and things like that, and then addressing it head on and providing solutions for it can definitely help a lot.
Definitely. And you know, those are all steps that individuals can take to look through and kind of weed through the news that they're consuming. You know, when I was digging around on the news literacy website, I came across a stat that I hadn't seen before that I thought it was kind of surprising, but it also made sense at the same point. And that was the fact that there is declining public trust in kind of institutional news media, and that was that about 39% of American adults say that they didn't trust the media in 2022 on the news literacy's website. Do you think that distrust is warranted by a large section of the population, or do you think it's a misconception of maybe the intent of these news stations, right? Of assuming that certain news stations are objective and then being disappointed when they're not. when their intention was never to be purely objective. It was to be objective within the framework that they're operating under. So do you think that distrust is kind of warranted and an indication of decline, or do you think that's kind of a national misperception on the role of some of these news networks?
So I definitely agree that it is warranted, all because a lot of news reporters or a lot of news organizations now, like, they're no longer, like mentioned earlier, like, it's no longer reporting, just the news and just the facts. A lot of organizations and a lot of articles, if you read them, it's becoming polarized. And so because it's becoming so polarized, people are starting not to put trust in the media anymore, which is a huge issue in so many ways, because how are we supposed to understand certain issues and certain situations that happen if we can't trust the media anymore? The press is like the first people usually like on the scene of a crime or something that happened. If we can't have trust in the media anymore, then who exactly can we trust anymore? And so that's exactly what our campaign's all about, and what the News Literacy Project is trying to help with, is to kind of decrease that number and put trust back into the media by holding the media accountable, by using rumor guard and these misinformation that's spreading and debunking it on their website. That's exactly what our campaign's all about, is again teaching people the skills to be more news literate. And that's what the News Literacy Project's all about too, is publicizing and holding people accountable for what they publish and making sure that what they're publishing is true, and again putting trust back into the media.
So that is an interesting statement. I kind of want to expand upon that a little more. So putting trust back in the media, when do you think there was that delineation when people stopped trusting the news, and should they have trusted the news beforehand? Because in my opinion, this is something that has been a problem since the early 1900s with yellow page journalism. So when do you think that the trust of the public, the general population, has gotten to the point that it is today?
Yeah, or maybe another way even to put that is, has the quality of the news decreased, or have we just realized the intrinsic problems that the news has more and more by shedding light on them?
Yeah, I would definitely say, the quality of news reporting has definitely decreased. Like Julian said, yellow journalism and things like that, that was a big issue, but we didn't have as many people at the time putting a lot of distrust in the media as we do now. And I feel like a big reason for that, I would say, was definitely during the shift of that happened in 2015, 2016, during the Trump presidency, where a lot of misinformation was spreading. This whole idea or this quote fake news kind of became a staple for his presidency. And so I definitely do believe it's definitely decreased the quality. News reporting has decreased the quality of it, but I don't believe that I feel like there's still room for it to kind of improve, of course, and organizations need to hold themselves accountable and hold their news reporters accountable. And again, as mentioned earlier, I feel like a code of standards that all news reporters and news organizations need to have would definitely help with misinformation spreading and those kinds of things.
Well, and it re-emphasizes the importance of what y'all doing, because it's a self-reinforcing cycle, right? Because the more people actually value objective reporting, the more people are able to see what is objective and what is not, the more the incentive will be for companies to do objective journalism, because more people will buy onto that, more people will look at that. Whereas when it's easier to see what is fake, it's also easier to avoid what is fake, therefore taking away the incentive to produce the fake information. And so kind of the more people look for the fake information, the more it's going to be produced, the more there's an incentive to produce it, the more it's out there, the more people see it, and it kind of, you get this downward spiral. Whereas with what y'all are doing, teaching people to identify the good information, hopefully that increases the incentives to produce good information, which will increase the quality of the information, and then we'll be able to see more good information, and it'll hopefully upward spiral in that direction.
Exactly. And I do believe, like, as individuals that aren't like news reporters, if individuals are more news literate, then they'll be able to hold these organizations accountable for, you know, the misinformation that they're spreading, and that will then cause them to, you know, kind of have better standards whenever it comes to news reporting. So if we teach the public to be more news literate and gain the skills to decipher fake news and holding these organizations accountable, then of course, like, you'll start to see better news reporting, and hopefully an increase in trust in the media, because news reporters and organizations are actually reporting factual information and not commentary or opinions and things like that. Again, that's more for, like, you know, a column or an editorial piece, to put your opinions and things like that. And
definitely. So I think largely we'll that all was really good information. That all was good. What exactly do y'all need to win the competition?
Yes.
That y'all are against the other 75 schools?
So after our implementation period is over, which it's over on March 6th, we have to create this large report, which is about 50 to 80 pages, so it is a lot, but pretty much everything that we did during our implementation period, so numbers, our followers, how many people interacted with our social media posts, or how many people attended our events, all that counts, and so that's pretty much what we have to do in our report, is really show that we created some kind of impact. So before our campaign launched, we had a pre-survey that we sent out to a lot of people. We got over 1,000 plus responses, and so that just pretty much asked people, you know, do you know what fake news is? Do you know what the News Literacy Project is? What kind of news organizations do you normally look at? Things like that. And then we'll release a post survey after our campaign has launched, and we'll ask people those same exact questions to see if we did our job and that we informed the public and taught the public the skills to decipher fake news and things like that, and we'll compare that. So it all just comes down to win. It really just comes down to our report, how strong our report is. Did we educate the public on the News Literacy Project and being able to decide and become more news literate? That's all that really counts. And it's a lot that goes into our report. We took a lot of pictures, a lot of videos. We have the analytics of, like, all of our social media posts that we'll also publish on there. We'll create graphs, things like that, to just kind of show the judges, you know, this is our research that we did, and this is kind of you know, how successful our campaign was, because of the social media posts that we had, the events that we held, just all that is all what's going to go in the report, and that's really what is going to how they're going to select the winner. And again, we're going against 75 other universities, so as we speak, all these universities are doing different events, having social media posts, different modes of media that they're using.
Definitely. And I'm just really quick, because we are live every hour, we have to do a station identification. So this is 91.1 KLSU Baton Rouge. So cool. I think we're going to go ahead, wrap up on that. That's really interesting. Best of luck. Is there anything else you just want to mention that you're involved in, that Plug in LSU, that the Bateman team's doing? Anything else in general you want to promote?
Yeah, so if any of this information was very interested, if you're interested in any of this, we do have a few more events coming up. Next week is our final week of implementation, and so we do have a karaoke night at the Rev that will be from 8:30 until 11, and we'll be doing karaoke and also kind of promoting our campaign as well as informing people about fake news and taking those skills, things like that. And then our big event that we have is on March, and then that's going to be February 28th, the karaoke night. And then on March 1st is our big event, which is our plug-in party. That will be in the journalism building at LSU, and that will be from, let me see, I believe it will be from 10:30 to 2:30, and we'll have games, activities, and these games are pretty much going to be tailored towards like identifying fake news, and our whole like theme of that is really like knowing the rules, knowing the techniques, and understanding the strategies to be able to decipher, fake news and things like that. And then any of our social media platforms is just plug in LSU. So if anything interests you, we'll be on there as well, and you can check out our website at pluginlsu.com.
And if people want to get involved with the Bateman team, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so to be involved with the Bateman team, you have to be a part of PRSSA, Public Relations Student Society of America, and it's an application process, so you'll apply. Typically, a lot of the times it's seniors that are on the team, but we've had juniors in the past be on the team. But pretty much you just apply. It's just an application process. You need letter of recommendations, a resume, things like that, and then a committee will select these 6 members of the Bateman team to represent LSU for this national competition.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, Sebastian. We really appreciate it. I think this was a good discussion.
Thank you,
Hopefully, I think there was a lot of takeaways for how people can responsibly consume news and get to know the truth in an ever-evolving environment. And that concludes our podcast for today. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We can be found on Instagram at @campus_connections. We can soon be found on Twitter, similarly, not quite yet, but soon. You can follow KLSU on all social media platforms. You can follow friend KLSU on Snapchat to send messages live during the show. As always, thank you for tuning in. I think we learned a lot during this. This was a great discussion. I hope everyone listening has a great week, and go Tigers.
Go Tigers.